Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastai Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paskatya Desatarane Om Agyanat Mirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurum Militang Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're continuing on from this series of 50 years in ISKCON, and I'm spending more time. I'm not going to do it in the same way as we go on through the 80s and the 90s. I'm spending a considerable amount of time, I think, with the 70s, because there just was so much that happened in such a short period of time. And it's not my intention that, that this is to be some historical account. It's just to reiterate that what my intentions are. It's just one person's experience growing up through different stages of development of ISKCON. And, of course, there's hundreds of stories which differ widely, and that will depend on when you joined, where you joined, who your leaders were, and also will depend upon your gender, your conditioning, your upbringing, and of course, whatever modes of nature we're mostly dominated and controlled by will play a part in coloring everyone's vision and how they explain things. So this isn't like one correct version. There's multiple versions that can all be true at the same time from different levels of realization and experience. So, and also much of what we hear about ISKCON history, we hear so much about the extraordinary pioneering devotees who really did extraordinary things. But there were also behind them so many just ordinary struggling devotees who were part of that unfoldment. And so this is part of that story also. How did the regular folks, the rank and file devotees, the ladies, how did we get through these different stages of development? What was the mindset, and why did we do what we did? So just where we left off last, I had been explaining about how I came to Krishna consciousness, that process, and I had left off where I had finally and very reluctantly decided to go to the temple in Detroit from where I was in a cabin in Canada. And that I got picked up, I was hitchhiking, and it was a very quiet ride because I was just thinking the whole way. I knew this was something very, very important, very intense, and I felt that I was being just practically physically pulled to the temple by an invisible hand. Some powerful force was tugging at me and pulling me to the devotees, despite my own feelings of resistance. And, because up to this point in my life, I had been seeking knowledge that was devoid of hypocrisy. And I had felt like throughout my life I was just whizzing through one thing after another, scrutinizing the ideas and the people and then tossing them out, Neti, 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 it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. And I just was trying very hard to understand what on earth was the purpose of this life. So while I was alone at the cottage, I found that there were a number of magazines. There was a bunch of Back to Godhead magazines, and there was a Bhagavad Gita, and so I was all alone, and I was just reading all these things. And as I read them, it was just, oh my God, this explains everything. Because I had come to feel like some very big questions, you know. I had understood that there was such a thing as karma. I accepted that, reincarnation, vegetarianism, so many things. But karma was a puzzle to me. You know, I got it that if you do good, it comes back to you. If you do bad, it comes back to you. But, you know, I came to this dilemma of, yeah, but who's to say what's good or what's bad? Who decides, you know? And, you know, some people thought it was good karma to distribute drugs to people and turn them on, you know? So who creates that moral compass? And I remember being very confused by this because I wanted to do the right thing. And I recall weeding in a garden. You know, it's like a hippie farm. They had a garden, and I was weeding one day, and I was thinking about karma, and then I was like, look what I'm doing. I'm killing one living entity, one weed, so that another, you know, vegetable can grow. And like, isn't that murder? Aren't I, you know, you can see I was confused. And, you know, so when I read, it was very clearly described in this, what I read, that there was, you know, such a thing as transcendental activities, and that are neither good nor bad, not good karma, not bad karma, but a vikarma, transcendental activities. And this was like, oh God, okay, that really makes sense. And then, you know, another big issue of the time was about freedom. You know, I mean, that was the 60s. We got to be free. And the concept of freedom was really whatever feels good, just do it. You know, that's freedom. Let the senses drag you around. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do this, you can't do that, you know. And of course, I saw the failure of that idea, you know, right in front of me, that really, God, what was everyone becoming? They were becoming like animals. I remember being in a tent on a farm where I was staying for a while with a bunch of other hippies, and you know, it started raining, and so the animals came in, and I'm laying there, and I can hear these animals, you know, panting in the tent, and then I hear some, you know, neighboring hippies, you know, getting it on next door, and I'm thinking, what is the difference? This is just like, this is a dog life. This isn't freedom, you know, but what is it? You know, what does it mean to be free, you know? And then, you know, in reading the books that were there, it was just, Prabhupada explained, you know, real freedom is when you're no longer a servant of the mind and the senses. Thus, the process of yoga and controlling the mind, you taking a hold. And, you know, it was such a relief to read these things. And then, of course, the other big issue of the time was, you know, about peace, that we want peace. We don't want war. And it was a big deal because us kids were going to war, getting killed. And we don't know what's going on. It was a really heavy time in America. And people sincerely didn't want war. But then I remember there was the peace formula. There was an article that I read from Prabhupada, you know, what is peace and how do you get it? And you're just never going to get it through peace marches. You know, you can't cram it down somebody's throat. According to your actions, as long as you continue to be violent, then you get violent reactions. And Prabhupada just clearly had this little line that just made everything fall into place, you know. to know that you're not the controller and you're not the enjoyer, that you have an eternal friend in Krishna, and this happens from inside. This is internal peace comes first, and then external peace is a possibility, but without that it's not, you know. So these were points that were one after another just being completely laid out, and I could not in any way deny them. And the next was that God is a person, and that he's not just a person like what we heard when we were young, you know, this like nasty guy in the sky, that he was ever youthful and he's fun and he dances and he's gorgeous. And the fact that he has a female counterpart, that really got me, you know, how, you know, the explanation how the material world is a perverted reflection. And it's natural, the things that we feel are natural. They're not evil, bad, nasty. It's just, it's inherent in the soul to want all these different rasas and relationships. It's just that we're looking in the wrong place, you know, wrongly placing it all. And it's just, you know, it's like everything clicking into place. It was so clear. And that really the purpose of life, you know, it was about purifying our hearts to develop a relationship with our eternal relationship with Krishna. You know, so for the most part, everything that I read while I was there, because I was just trying to figure out what's my next step. And it just seemed crystal clear. I didn't feel like it was something new that I had to learn, but it was something that was already inside of me, something buried that was now being uncovered, something that I knew in the deepest recesses of my being. And so, of course, there was like amazement and joy in getting all this information. But still, I felt really uncomfortable still with the term God. You know, it just carried so much baggage. It was almost repugnant, you know. This is about God? Did I have to become religious? But even more scary was the realization that to embrace this philosophy would mean action, you know, that I would change and commitment and a whole new way of life. And I just couldn't continue to sit around in an armchair philosophizing and smoking dope with friends. I would have to walk my talk, or I would just be another of the so many kinds of hypocrites I had already seen. So I hadn't really anticipated that this was where my journey was going to take me. And it was scary. And I felt a lot of resistance, despite, you know, knowing this is right, this is right, this is right. So yes, I want the truth, but does it mean that I have to be with these people and wear weird clothes and dance in the street and join an institution? I mean, institution was like a 4-letter word in those days. It's like, it was appalling, you know, join a group, you know. It was, I had become pretty cynical about religious institutions and even yogis and gurus. I had seen a lot of what seemed totally phony and empty to me. I remember a friend of mine getting into Kundalini yoga, and you know, God, what they got him to do. And in the meantime, he's still taking drugs and everything. And he went, you know, raising the Kundalini to, and that such a nice person. He went stark raving mad through that. So I was like, whoa. We have to be careful what we're embracing here. And, you know, so anyway, all these thoughts were swirling in my mind as we headed towards Detroit. So I'm just sitting in the car and all these thoughts are going through me. But, you know, regardless, I was helplessly being pulled there and getting closer and closer. And it was very, very clear to me that whatever the outcome, that this was meant to be. I couldn't I couldn't stop it. The wheels were turning, literally. And so, you know, eventually after a few hours, we arrived at the temple. We pulled up at 8311 Jefferson Avenue across the street from the Clock Restaurant. And right across the street from where my driver was going, which was pretty amazing to me. So I had previously gone to the first temple on Forest Street, which was just like a little house, but ISKCON was growing fast in Detroit. So now they were on a main road with a very nice, large, you know, kind of a little bit mansion-like house. I don't know what it was before we had it. I don't know if it was just a home, but it was a big place and very nice place. And it must have been Sunday because the devotees were there when I arrived. And it's so vivid remembering walking in and how I felt that I had just entered into another world, literally. And how it was so bright. And everything was yellow, like they used to paint really bright colors in those days, but it was so clean, and it was more than just the colors, but everything was like bright and clean and fresh, and the smells and the beautiful paintings on the walls. And it was just an extraordinary feeling just to enter into that space. And so, of course, the devotees rushed to welcome me with, you know, over-the-top enthusiasm, which made me feel awkward and even more resistant. And the girls just swiftly ushered me up to this wide white staircase to the Brahmacharini quarters, which was a big bare room, not a piece of furniture in it. And there they tried to dress me in devotional attire. And I resisted. No, I don't want to wear a sari. But I did settle for a long skirt and a t-shirt. And no, I don't want to braid my hair, but I settled for pulling it back in a long ponytail. All the while I kept assuring the girls that I was just here for a few days, and you know, none of them were buying it. No, we know you're a devotee. And I'm like, I don't know. And of course I reconnected with Diane, who she was in a previous story that I told. And I couldn't relate to her at all. She just seemed really strange. I mean, I knew her as a very wild hippie. And now she was like this saint with her like all tied up tight and head covered and all. It was just like a little bit too much for me. And but then I saw Candy. She was another old friend, and she was a little bit, that was okay. And I saw Bob Blake, and whose cabin I had been staying at. And we went out to take a walk, but we were told very, very quickly that the brahmacharis and the ladies don't go for walks together. So that was I don't think I spoke to Bob Blake again for quite a while. And from that point on, I was just swept into a powerful whirlwind of extremely intense activities, one after another, and just like being sucked into a devotional vortex of non-stop string of activities. You know, now it's time for class. Now it's time for cleaning. Now it's time to go on Harinam, and one thing after another, and really no break. And it was the absolute opposite of my previous life, you know, as laid-back hippie life, stay up all night, sleep in the day, you know. Oh my God. And I thought, don't these people ever relax? you know, it was a big change, you know, and I was on a steep learning curve, you know, so many new words and activities and rules, and it could be very intimidating and frustrating, not knowing what to do. Now we bow, now we touch this flame to our head, and now we sing these Sanskrit songs, and it was just endless new things to absorb. And, you know, of course, these experiences are different for different devotees, you know. For me, I didn't find that it was all fun. I was like, oh, God, I want to sit down. You know, I wasn't like many devotees that just swept up in bliss, you know. I mean, it was amazing, you know, but still, it took some adjusting to. And at that time, there was probably around, it's hard to say, maybe 20 devotees, 25, I don't think more than 30 devotees. When I joined, there was many devotees were coming and going, and the temple was also was growing very rapidly. But everyone was young. Everyone. I don't think there was anybody over 30 there. And no adults. As we used to say, Prabhupada was the only adult in the Hare Krishna movement in the beginning. You know, but we were all from sort of similar backgrounds, typical American youth, mostly from good middle and upper class families. There was one black devotee, I remember, quite a few Jewish devotees. There was no Indians, not one Indian. And there was one devotee, we called him Bhakta Chris, who to us was like some old man. I mean, probably was 40 or something. I don't know, but he still worked. He worked outside, and then we'd pack him a lunch, and he was addicted to prasadam, and he was just like a very unusual person amongst all of us, who eventually went on to get initiated about 15 years later. So mostly, you know, was unmarried boys and girls, and a few householders who obviously didn't hold any houses. They were all, there was one child, as far as I remember, Vaishnava, the son of Bhagavan, and they had a room rather than being in the ashram, you know, in the house. So the few married couples had rooms to themselves in the building. And so my general feeling was I felt really great respect and appreciation for all these really cool people, I thought. You know, they all look so bright and happy, and they're really trying and fully dedicated to like really serious spiritual growth, and they're all vegetarians and all doing this like really hard stuff to do. And you know, there were many really, really beautiful young people. I mean, many of them had had a brush with hippie life or a full immersion, but, you know, all varieties of types of people, you know, were there. And to me, I thought they just seemed like angels, you know. They just seemed like angels to me. And I just, around them, I just felt so small and shy, and I was like really quiet. And I really wasn't confident yet that I fit in with them. I felt like I had a much darker side, and I just didn't know if I was going to make it in there. But what struck me the most, and what was just so new to me and so different, was the expression of devotion. The environment of bhakti was so powerful, it was so palpable. And this was just so different from all that I had been familiar with, you know, before. All the impersonalists, the yogis, the hippies. It was all me-centered. And this idea of selfless service, wow, this was so different. And it really struck me as I was, because I was just observing and observing everything. I've always felt like I was more of an observer than a participant in life. And so I was really watching the devotees. And I remember watching Krishna Vamini. She was a very beautiful woman, Bhagavan's wife, and the temple president, NGBC. And I was watching her clean Srila Prabhupada's Vyasa-san, and how she was doing it with so carefully and so delicately and with so much devotion and so much heart, that I remember I was just amazed to see that this is bhakti. This is love in action. And that was absolutely new experience. And many devotees, they just struck me like, look at how they do this. Like there was a devotee, Ladini, who's a great saint, no doubt. And probably, I think there's a book about her now. Amazing. But she was just a simple lady in those days. She was probably around 20 or 22. And I saw she came in, brought in Lord Jagannath. We had big Jagannath deities there. And she brought in the Lord's plate and she set it down in front of him. And then she looked up at him like, the way she looked up at him. I still remember this, like 50 years later, that she's like a woman that was just totally in love. It shocked me. It almost embarrassed me. It was like, is that for real? Or is this just some kind of weird sentimental thing? It was very, very striking. And then I remember on one of the first Harinams, how the devotees were, chanting with such bliss. And a devotee, also an amazing devotee woman, Sharadiya, we called her Saradia. I think she was called Saradia all her life because we didn't know how to pronounce the Sanskrit names. And some people just kept, people in the beginning called me Sitala, like a zillion years later. It's like, no, it's Sitala or Shitla or something, whatever. So different people call me different things depending on when we met. So Sharadiya, she was on Harinam and the Kirtan. I remember her just calling out and saying, if only I have 1,000 tongues and 1,000 mouths to sing this name. I was like, wow, she really loves this. and it was real. These were real, true devotional sentiments. And so, this was the big change. This is like, why were you there? Why did you do it? To understand that our life is meant to be filled with devotion. And you can see it and you can feel it in action. It's not just some philosophy, but it's action, and that is love. And I'd already deduced that this so-called love in the material realm was not really all that it was cracked up to be. But what is love? So here I was seeing the answer, not hearing the answer. I was seeing the answer. How simple, yet sweet, and how profound. And, so you see the importance of the association of devotees. There's the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. And these devotees were all persons Bhagavats to me. I needed to see it in action. And they gave me vision and inspiration. It was devotees. I was convinced by the philosophy, but when I saw the devotees, Not everybody, of course. It wasn't like everybody really was totally saints, but still, there was enough of it manifest in front of me that I became totally convinced that I want to be like them. I want to be like these people. So within a few days, my resistance was gone, and I was committed to staying in the temple. And there was just absolutely no going back. I was just spinning very, very fast away from my previous life. It was like a rebirth, but it was not a conversion. There's absolutely no sense whatsoever that I was converting to a new religion or that I was becoming Indian or becoming Hindu. I mean, absolutely not. Totally no sense of that. I was embracing a new way of viewing the world, of living in the world, of seeing myself as a spirit soul, and I was trying to become a servant of Krishna. So I fell into it, into the very rigid schedule of non-stop devotional service. When I think back on it, I think it was how amazingly disciplined we were, considering where we were coming from. We had absolutely no free time. We didn't read anything else, no newspapers, magazines, no looking at anything else. And the thing is, it's not because, oh, you don't do that, it's bad. We just didn't want to do any of it. We just did not want to do other things. There was so much to learn. It was so new, it was exciting. And how to do these things, how to understand the philosophy. It was absorbing, it wasn't like, I was holding myself back from going back out in the material world. Not at all. So, I surrendered, put on the sari, and I braided my hair and put on tilak. But it wasn't an Indian thing. But it was part of embracing a new identity, and it was very helpful in leaving the old identity behind. This is how I am, when I'm identifying as a spirit soul. Like when you dress, you identify with something, so you put on you go to certain activities, so you put on different types of clothes, So putting on this dress was just, keeping in the mode of being a devotee, being a spirit soul. And I like the idea of changing, in this way, like shedding my previous false identity. Because we really wanted to show that we're standing out as being for something else. We're not buying into the ordinary, to the status quo. We didn't want to be normal. We didn't want to look normal or fit in. We wanted to stand out, and we certainly did. And we wanted to show that we're really different. Our outlook, our goals, our food, our entertainment, our dress, everything is totally different. No blending in. And, that's how it was. Devotees wore saris and dhotis, and there was nothing other than that. In this period, I'm only talking about this when I first joined, what was there. And I also liked the idea of the simplicity of the sari. That is just, it's one piece of cloth, and we didn't have like all kinds of flash Indian saris. We just had, we bought 6 or whatever it is, 7 meters of cloth, and one size fits all forever. And again, showing that that we don't buy into the mundane ideas of fashion and beauty. We have another way of seeing it, and that there's no validity to the, like high fashion labels, and that is just trickery to make big money off foolish people who allow others to tell them what is cool and what is not, and that has to change constantly so that those people can make more and more money. Of course, this fit in well with the hippie ideology. So, it's kind of certain concepts were just carrying over. And so this is how we were seeing it then. And I really liked, again, some hippie concepts that, the idea of simplicity, just having what you need, just the bare necessities, not trying to look beautiful or impress somebody. At that time, I'm not saying these are the right things. I'm just saying this is what we were thinking. And the devotee girls didn't wear makeup or, jewelry or anything. Nobody told us not to. But in general, that was a hippie thing anyway. So it wasn't like a big deal. It wasn't forbidden, but nobody did it. And that mood was there of simplicity, that we were aiming for that. Whether you were brahmachari, brahmacharini, gridhasta, man or woman, we were trying to train ourselves to see that beauty's on the inside. And the emphasis was on that I'm not this body. So this was the emphasis, I'm not this body, I'm a soul. So why would we, like I remember in the brahmacharini quarters, there was a full-length mirror going into the bathroom. And the girls just painted it over because, we don't want to look at ourselves in there. We're going to, think we're our bodies. And they just left a little hole so we could put on our tilak. I'm not advising these things. I'm just telling you what we did. Spontaneously, it wasn't something, Prabhupada said you should do, but this was the emphasis. And, it was our way of embracing the philosophy. And that's how it was during this particular period of time in ISKCON. There was also, at this time, no personal ownership. There was just a big pile of saris and petticoats, and we didn't even have cholis, actually. I think we wore t-shirts mostly, at least in the beginning. And that changed fairly soon, where we had our own stuff. But at that time, nobody had their own things. And it was the same daily program. Everybody up together. And you shower, and Mangalarti, and japa, and class, and breakfast, and cleaning duties, and Sankirtan until lunch. Come back for lunch, go back out for Sankirtan, rush back, shower, class, hot milk, Krishna book, and just fall into the sleeping bag in total exhaustion, at least me. And every day without fail. So, sing the Samsara prayers, sing the Gora Arti songs, worship Tulsi, Guru Puja. Of course, the Guru Puja song we didn't sing that when I joined, that came later. And we often had Shri Upanishad, extra classes with Shri Upanishad. And it was so intense and such commitment and austerity that, I felt like surely with all this effort, we would all be pure devotees within weeks. Such dedication. And I remember Narottam, the cook in the kitchen, I was in there cutting vegetables, and I remember that I remarked to him, I said, God, you've been doing this like every day for like 9 months, or maybe he joined about 9 months or a year before. I said, you must be completely pure now. And I really meant it. And Narottam started laughing. He said, well, not exactly. But anyway, pretty much everybody did the same thing together. There were the same expectations and service, whether married, unmarried, woman, man, temple president, GBC. Everyone was an ashram devotee. To be a devotee meant to live in the ashram and do full-time service. And that's it. It was very black and white. That's, but for me, you know, it wasn't easy. I was exhausted all the time. And, you know, I wasn't necessarily keen on doing everything. And sometimes I found it very hard. And I remember being in the kitchen on Sunday, everyone would go in, you know, and help. We all did things together. So they were rolling samosas, and you had to you were like on an assembly line, and you had to do it really fast. And you know, I was new, and I remember I just started crying, you know. There was just tears going, this is like too much, you know. And then this devotee, Vilasini, she just saw me, and she just like whispered to me, "Why, come over here with me," you know. So she took me into a little more quiet area, and we just like did the thing there, and it was so much easier. And so then she was kind of like my first friend. And, you know, and she also was struggling with things, so I could relate to somebody that wasn't an angel. Vilas, she wasn't an angel, but she was. And so she used to help me because she'd been around a few months before me, so she was senior. She was a senior devotee, maybe 3 months before me. And so I remember japa time and sitting and thinking, oh, God, finally I can just sit down and I have time to think. And I mentioned that to Vilasini, and she said, think? That's not what you do during japa. You're supposed to be meditating on the holy names. Every name, you're supposed to hear every name. And she went and got me a mantra card, and she said, you have to look at the card and you look at every word. And she said, come on, you should walk around the temple. We should circumambulate the temple, and you should look at this card and you just concentrate. You're supposed to be meditating. You're not supposed to be thinking. This is not your space out time. And I was like, oh, okay. I even have to work during that time. So, you know, but she taught me a lot that I'm eternally grateful for. That she also told me, she said, you know, if anything gets hard, you just have to meditate on the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. Now, I haven't even seen Radharani. You know, we don't have any deities of Radharani yet. And I was like, well, I don't know what her feet look like. And she said, I'll show you. I have a picture. So I guess she'd come from New York, I think. And somehow she had a photo of Radharani's lotus feet. She said, this is the best advice I got in my whole life from Vilasini. I owe her big time. She said, you know, whatever's happening, you just think of her feet and you just pray to her, and, you know, everything will be okay. So that was pretty amazing advice for us young kids at such an early time, that Vilasini had that understanding, and she did, you know. So we lived a very Spartan life, and we each had a sleeping bag. We slept on the floor. There were no beds. The room was empty, no chairs. Always we sat on the floor for eating or anything. And, you know, the economic situation was that we were all penniless, yet we were very cautious about spending any money. We wouldn't spend a drop, and very, you know, not wasting Krishna's energy was really important. Somehow that was just, I don't know, beat into us, that don't waste Krishna's energy. And so, you know, we did go on Sankirtan throughout the whole day, and we did give out sticks of incense and Back to Godhead magazines. That was what we were doing when I joined. And if we got any money, that was just dumped out in a pile, and there was nothing competitive about it yet, anyway. And, we were only getting like a few quarters and not any big money. I remember seeing Krishna Bhamini having a couple of dollars in her bag, and I was like, wow, how'd you get that? To me, that was hard. But, it was mind-boggling variety of new rules and ways of living that we had to just immediately absorb. And, rules like, I don't know if all these rules, if we still follow all these rules, but, that we always had to have clean clothes, that we never ever wore our clothes into the bathroom, and always without fail shower after passing stool, regardless of what you're doing. And in the kitchen, you don't touch your hair or your face. You have to rinse your hands. And when you wake up in the morning, you have to immediately offer your obeisances and roll up your sleeping bag. And there was a bucket and a sponge there, and you had to wash the floor where you slept. And then, 2 to 3 minute cold shower. Cold shower is supposed to be good for you. Well, nowadays they're saying that is true. What is it, Wim Hof? He's getting everybody to do cold showers now. So we did that, and we had to brush our teeth with this gooey Srila Prabhupada recipe of toothpaste, which was disgusting. And whenever we drank water, we said Shri Vishnu, Shri Vishnu, Shri Vishnu 3 times. Don't know where that came from. And we never put any like offered food next to unoffered. There were 2 refrigerators. And in the morning, we offered obeisance to every devotee. And we took a second bath before Gaura Arati. And we often tried to, you weren't really supposed to touch your lip when you're drinking. You're supposed to do like Prabhupada. And of course, most of us weren't very good at that. But, and Ekadashi was 25 rounds. And we would have what they would refer to as the Ekadashi feast. It means we'd have peanuts and raisins, carrot halava. I mean, it was a nice prasadam. It wasn't austere to me. And 25 rounds was, it was just everybody did that. Now, whether Prabhupada ever said that, I don't think so. But that's what we did where I was when I joined. So we're just, just trying to do the externals was overwhelming. We were just babies, floating on the surface of whatever all these new things were. And so, of course, it was, we're not really deep, but we were enthusiastic. And for me, often, I just felt exhausted. And so I would think of leaving and go somewhere, at least for a while. I need a break, So, but I never did. So why didn't I? Well, a few reasons. One is the classes. Now most of the classes were given by Bhagavan, who is the temple president. Not all, but many. And he was an excellent speaker, at least in my estimation. And those classes, like I would always feel after, most of the day I was feeling very enthusiastic, but that second Harinam in the afternoon, going out in the downtown Detroit, getting dark time. It was just so horrible to be out there. And, so that's when it used to start. I used to start thinking, oh, God, I don't want to do this. But then we'd come home and I'd be thinking, maybe I'll go somewhere. But then it was time for class. So go to class. And then it was just, like nectar pouring in the ears, that it was like Krishna consciousness was like an endless bag of philosophical presents that you just keep unwrapping, more and more answers coming out, and it was just fantastic. And, the skeptic in me was just won over. And, as the verse says, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. And that was really my experience, that it just filled me up. It filled me up and it kept me going. I especially loved the evening Bhagavad Gita class. It just was wonderful. And, as far as the classes themselves, they were a little more short at that time. And they were with discussion. And so someone would speak, maybe 20 minutes, and then, there was more. It was more of not somebody speaking at you, but everybody in there together trying to understand these things. And as far as ladies giving class in that early time, now I never, during this phase, no one ever said that we couldn't give classes. It was the last thing that I wanted to do at that time. I mean, I'm like an introvert. I really, really, that's the last thing I wanted to do was give classes. So it certainly wasn't any problem for me, but nobody was saying you couldn't. There were a lot of men that didn't give classes. There were really a few that were good at it, and they did it, which makes sense. And I was actually forced by Bhagavan one time, very early on, and he said, I want you to give class. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And he was like, yes, you are. And I was like, no, I'm stubborn. He's even more stubborn. And then, I realized that I am going to have to do this. And it was terrible. I thought I would have heart failure. I mean, wow. It was difficult. And I did do it. And it was really hard. And I really enjoyed it afterwards. But I realized, this is something that, sometimes people have to be pushed into something. And eventually it just becomes normal and you just learn how to do it and you go on. But, for many women, we didn't. And many of us didn't want to. It wasn't like an issue of the men going, you can't do it. It was like a lot of men didn't want to give class either. So in this period of time, it wasn't, no one was stopping anybody from doing it if they wanted to do it. And then there was a little phase there that there had been the first kind of big controversy that had happened in New Vrindavan with the 4 sannyasis. And I won't get into explaining that. That's explained many places. But after that controversy, there was a concern that we didn't know the philosophy well enough. That somehow we got bowled over and we did something that wasn't right. And we didn't know how to defeat this wrong philosophy. So I don't know where it came from. We decided that we needed to have one day where we just have all classes. And then the next day would be all preaching, Harinam, and whatever. We did do other kinds of programs also. And it was kind of fun, we had Nectar Devotion, we had Sri Upanishad, we had current events and Bhagavatam and, Brahma Samhita, maybe. And of course, as you may suspect, there were a lot of devotees nodding out and sleeping in class. And when when Srila Prabhupada heard about it, he told Bhagavan, no, no, morning and evening class, that's adequate. So that was stopped, But as far as what else kept me there, well, like everybody else, prasadam, it was just majorly important. There was just so much emphasis on prasadam. It really seemed we were eating different food. It was purifying food. And it was simple. We ate very frequently on wax paper, just pieces of wax paper on the floor. And we had a very simple kind of cereal glop for breakfast. And at lunch, because we didn't have much money, and so mostly we had split pea soup. We didn't have dal, mung dal yet, as far as I know. There was like a very thick split pea soup, a little bit of sabji, and chapatis, stacks of chapatis. But that split pea, I still can remember it. It was so good. We would eat bowls of it, bowls of split pea soup and stacks of chapatis, 5-10 chapatis. We were young people. We were busy all day long, and we would eat. And it felt, so purifying. In the evening, we had milk and maybe a banana, and somebody would read Krishna book during that time. But basically everybody lived for the Sunday feast, which was, it wasn't just that it was, really good eats. The Sunday feast was a tremendous act of devotion. The way that Narottam was the cook, and he was famous already around American ISKCON as a phenomenal cook. And he would start thinking about the feast on Wednesday, and he would sit with like a clipboard, and he would meditate on colors, textures, spices, flavors, how to make, and it was real meditation. And then he would have to go out. He would go out and beg the boga. And everybody got a kick out of him. He was kind of small-bodied with this long sika and kind of a jolly young boy. And so he would come back. People would save lots of things for him. So he was able to make these feasts that I have never, even after. Those feasts were something extraordinary, and they made devotees just by eating those feasts. And people would come back and come back. And so we lived for it. And, anytime I thought of going somewhere to rest, I'd think, yeah, but, it's Sunday in 2 days, and I don't want to miss a feast. And, and the Sunday feast itself was primarily for meeting people. We were out all week, and we were waiting to see who will we speak to. Who's come, so the Sunday feast wasn't about us. It was about the people that were going to come after we'd spent the whole week going out, giving out, cards and prasadam and this and that, And, prasadam was just very, very important to us. We never bought food outside at this time. We didn't eat anything packaged. We didn't eat bread. We didn't, somehow we thought yeast is not a good thing. I don't know, but at that time, that's what we were told. Where it came from, I can't say. But the mood amongst the devotees was, towards each other, was really respectful. It was respectful. Like, we knew, okay, we're trying to do this thing here. We're we need to help each other, you know. So it was an interesting, you know, it was interesting how we were close, but we were not in any way frivolous, or there wasn't unnecessary talk, and, you know, but there was really a loving spirit that was there. I mean, that it's not like it was all peaches and cream or anything, you know, or there wasn't weirdos that you didn't like, or there wasn't somebody that drove you nuts or whatever. But in general, the spirit was, it was respectful. And that was borne out by using this term Prabhu, which I will explain my experience of and why we used it and what it meant to us at that time. Now, when the first few days I was there, I kept hearing everybody, you know, you keep hearing all these new words, you know, karmi and fried, and I don't know, so many words. We have this new Muchi vocabulary that you have to pick up all this jargon. And so this Prabhu, I couldn't figure out what they were saying, you know. So I remember I asked someone, what is that you're saying to each other, you know? And they said, oh, that means you're offering respect to the other person as taking a humble position, that Prabhu, you're my master. Like, everyone is seen that we're trying to learn that we're souls in a body, and that we respect that in each other, and that if we're servants of Krishna, then we're also servants of all the devotees. So it was like a very respectful term, but it was like a transcendental term. It had absolutely nothing at this time. It had nothing to do with gender, nothing. There was no it was just, this is what you call another Vaishnava, you know, that this is the mood in which we have relationships, that it's not about the body, it's about this Vaishnav and how I'm supposed to feel towards them. So I bring this up not as, you know, any controversy, you know, it's just that the emphasis, where you place the emphasis, it was on the eternal spiritual identity. And that is very, very important. Whether it's Prabhu or whatever it may be, but how we view each other, the emphasis is on the eternal spiritual identity. And this is extremely, extremely important for all generations in all times, whatever term you want to use. It's not the term, it's not the word, it's the mood in which it's used. So then the other thing, why not going out and taking a break, was that this mood, everything was about Srila Prabhupada. And there's constant talk about Prabhupada, we're constantly hearing from Prabhupada. And, you know, for me, it was just, I was inspired by the love that I saw other people had. You know, he was a picture on the Vyasa-san for me. And, you know, I didn't know. I hadn't met him yet. But Srila Prabhupada's presence was very much felt and experienced. And it was the thread that bound all of us together. And so therefore there was just so much respect for those who had his association. Most of us hadn't, that were there in the Detroit temple at that time. Very few of the devotees had even seen Prabhupada yet. But it was the heartbeat. And a letter would come occasionally in the morning, and someone would blow the conch shell and yell out that there's a letter from Prabhupada, and everyone would come running down. And so this was a great impetus for all of us to keep going, this inspiration that would come through Srila Prabhupada's letters. And after some time, I think Bhagavan noticed that sometimes I was a bit down and out or whatever. And so he gave me a service, which was unusual. Most of us were all doing the same things and going up, but he needed someone to transcribe Srila Prabhupada's tapes, lectures that were on tape. So sometimes I had this opportunity. And this helped me so much, just hearing and hearing and hearing Srila Prabhupada. So that was another thing that really bound me strongly to staying at the temple. And then as far as the deities there, I really, I didn't even really kind of wonder about them. They were just so strange. Big Lord Jagannath. And I don't even remember wondering, who are they? That's where we sang, that's where we chanted, and it was a very simple deity worship at that time, but it's a very high level of cleanliness. And just to give you a sense of how much it was new to us, was that I hadn't been in the temple for longer than 2 or 3 weeks, and I was chanting japa, and Bhagavan came and said, could you help to bathe the deities? And I didn't even understand that sentence. Bathe the deities. I don't know, what is that? What do you want me to do? And he said, well, you just go behind the curtain, and Krishna Bhamini is there, and she'll tell you what to do. So I said, okay. So I go behind the curtain. This is actually my first experience of being with the deities, because I just wasn't present somehow, even though I was in the temple room. And, going on the altar there, and as soon as I went behind the altar, I just was stunned. I just felt, wow, where am I? What is this? And so I looked up. The altar was very high. Lord Jagannath was up high, and there were some steps. And Krishna Bhamini was up. She was up on the top step, and she had a bucket, a plastic bucket, and a big sponge and soapy water, and she was bathing Lord Balaram, wiping him with a sponge. And I'm like looking like, what the heck is going on here? And so she said, oh, come on up. You can do the black one. The black one. So I'm like, okay, white, yellow, black, all right. So I get this bucket, another bucket, and I climb up on the altar and I start to wipe Lord Jagannath, his big eyes looking at me. And I just was like, whoa, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. It was utterly overwhelming. And I just became like, I felt like I just shrunk, to a tiny little speck. And, I just did it and got out of there. I had the feeling I need to just do this and go. Then later, someone said that, probably you shouldn't be doing that. I was like, well, why? And I thought, well, I didn't think so, but why? And they said, well, you're not, I wasn't even first initiated, so obviously we hadn't really figured things out so much about deity worship yet. But very soon, a devotee named Maithili came from Los Angeles, and she had been fully trained by Shilavati, who was like in LA, that was where people went, they got trained in how to do worship under Shilavati's guidance. and then they went somewhere else where they could teach others. So Mai Tahili came from there, and she was a powerhouse. She was like super mega pujari, and she, if anybody knows Mai Tahili, she's a really strong lady, and she just whipped everybody into shape. And we had, when I think back, it was such a high standard. I mean, Mai Tahili, she did all the artis. At that time, it was like the pujaris stayed back to do everything. Everybody else went out. One person stayed to cook. Another person did laundry. Otherwise, everybody else was out. And people would sort of take turns with some of those duties. And Mai Tahili would put on a fresh sari every time she did arti. She had like 5 saris a day or something. And she and a couple other ladies would get up at 2:30 in the morning, and they would polish every bit of all the brass, all the silver, and they would make the Mangal Arti offering, which was at that time Prabhupada cookies and milk for Mangal Arti. I don't know why, but that's what we had, and it was really nice. And of course, Harinam was the main activity, and it was very clear when you spend, 4 to 8 hours, 10 hours chanting the holy name, that is really, really an experience of immersion. And I felt so much when we would go out on Harinam and we'd come out, we were just engulfed. We were somewhere else, and the Detroit city was out there, but we were in this higher realm, and we were really experiencing the happiness of chanting the holy name on the streets. And it just was so vivid. It was so dynamic. And of course, we were, what we looked like and how we dressed and the whole thing. I mean, but still, people could see that this was something extraordinary. These people are out here for hours and hours, and they're really happy, and they're dancing, and they're, endlessly. I remember Vishnu Jan came at one point, and he had asked Srila Prabhupada, is there some way to make rapid spiritual advancement? Is there a way to accelerate it? And Prabhupada said, yes, more Harinam. Now, he was already doing like all day Harinam. So he increased it. Like, he went out, he just had come to Detroit, I think it was just a few days. And but he was going out before us, and he was staying out afterwards. And I remember people, it would blow their mind. His fingers were all bandaged from banging the drums for so many hours a day. And he was so happy chanting. And, I remember talking to one businessman. He was like, that man was doing that when I went into work, and he's doing it still when I came out of work. And look at him. He's so happy. I was like, yeah, that's the holy name. And, so this was our main experience, is that we were doing Harinam. And we gave out, at this time, incense and back to Godheads. And, everybody went. The temple was quiet except for these few people that had to do some things at the temple. And sometimes on the Harinam, ladies sometimes led. Occasionally there was Chaitanya Dasi. She came from LA, and she was a really good mridanga player, and she used to love to play mridanga and sing. Nobody had any problem with it at that time. We used to sing Om Purnam. We used to sing Shri Upanishad on the street. And as far as in the temple, kirtan at that time, kirtan was simple, and, You didn't have to be a good singer or anything. It wasn't about that. It wasn't at all a performance. It was, kirtan was a different thing. And there was no harmonium for kirtans. And we had two rows. The men faced the women, at least, so that you could look at the deities, or you could look at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, his Vyasa-san was in the back, and then I'm just trying to remember, it was that way in New Mayapur and Paris, but now I'm thinking that actually in the first Detroit temple, because Prabhupada's Vyasa-san was next. So, but there were still two kind of rows. Like, in other words, women were in the front, men were in the front, men were in the back, women were in the back. It was like that. It seemed fine. And so these were these early days. So the temple president, Bhagavan, he had been in Los Angeles when I first joined. So he'd been gone a couple of weeks maybe. And then when he came back, he saw, well, there's this new brahmacharini. And after a few days, he called me to his office. And he said, he wanted to know, are you planning to stay? And how are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to stay. Everything's great. Loving it. And then Bhagavan said, well, if you're going to stay, then you should probably get married. And it was like, what? That was the last thing I was thinking of at that time. And I was like, really? And I mean, must have seen my shock. So he said, no, well, not immediately, but, Prabhupada said it's better. It's better to just, the boys and girls get married so this, they can go out and open centers and, help each other in Krishna consciousness. So, he explained a little bit about it to me, and I was like, oh, okay. Just another thing to kind of take in. And then he went on to preach to me. And we had a wonderful discussion, long discussion, and it was just really wonderful. And then when I was going out the door, he said, like an afterthought, he said, well, how would you feel if I just write to Srila Prabhupada and ask him about you getting married? And I was like, what? I said, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know, okay. It didn't mean anything to me. Maybe it flashed in my mind that Prabhupada would hear that I'm a new devotee here or something, And I was like, yeah, whatever, It was just like a small thing, an afterthought at the end of the conversation, and then that was that. Now, while I was there in these early times, I mean, a few friends of my old friends came to see me, and I was shocked because I thought, wow, they're going to really like to hear all this stuff. And I just thought everybody was going to hear and then become devotees, and, but not at all. Everybody's like, whoa, you've gone a little wonky. And even one boy that I used to be with, he actually came to kind of kidnap me. He thought I'd been brainwashed, I'm like, look, Timmy, I'm not brainwashed. I want to do this, So it was a surprise. It was like, okay, goodbye, everybody. I've just got a whole new group of people here now. You people are not interested. So what to do? And so in general, there was this sense of incredible urgency that what we were doing was extremely important for human society. We had a mission and we had a purpose, and everything revolved around outreach, preaching. And everyone is involved, and there was nothing much else going on. and we were really serious about changing the world. We took prasadam and we took books everywhere. We felt it was so important, like even if we passed somebody in the street, I remember feeling guilty. Oh, I didn't say Hare Krishna. I didn't give a mantra card. Maybe they'll never meet another devotee in 10,000 lifetimes or something. And it was extreme. But we saw it as very, very important, and that we would never go anywhere without cards and prasad or books or something. And we really, really felt that we were out to help people. You give somebody some prasadam, they're going to have a human birth. And, that is a big deal, So we were in that mood, and we were really proud to be devotees, where we weren't embarrassed to be in the institution, or it was building it was our life. And we are trying all different ways to build it up quickly and effectively, so then we started to do like college programs, school programs, going into the neighborhoods. We did a lot of distribution of, we would have peanuts and raisins in these little packages with the mantra, and made a lot of peanut butter burfi and laddu. And we were very, very focused on this war with Maya. So we look, was our attitude naive and fanatical? Well, yeah, and no. We had faith in the words and the vision of Srila Prabhupada. And, was our small group of immature kids, were we going to make this happen? Well, it was Lord Chaitanya's prediction. Srila Prabhupada said it, and it has to happen. And someone had to do it. And so, Ram used his monkey army, so Srila Prabhupada was using us, his Malecha army of kids. And but Prabhupada didn't treat us like we were incapable children. Not at all. He was we had a serious job to do, a very serious thing. And so, the attitude, however naive or whatever it may be, our feeling was kind of that within, a few years, we were going to really, affect the whole world. And, shortly thereafter, we'll all be pure devotees and we'll go back to Godhead. Well, in eternal time, maybe that isn't so funny. Maybe that is so true. At least we would kickstart things. But it was a revolutionary mood, and it fit into the times. And we weren't really, it wasn't wrong, sure. We were naive, but Srila Prabhupada said it would happen, and so certainly it was true. But we also certainly did not understand or realize the quantity of work that was required, and the time and effort that would be required, the maturity, the purity required to actually bring about substantial change. So that was massively underestimated, but it was a beautiful spirit, and it was true, and Prabhupada did use us, and it did get started, So it was both things, it was true, and we had faith, and we were also naive and didn't really see the whole picture. But Prabhupada taught us that in the course of our preaching activities, that everyone who comes is sent by Krishna. And so you have to tolerate, because they must be special if Lord Chaitanya sent them. So out of all the living entities, these people are coming. And so we have to see like that. So that was a very, very good training to see, not to see, oh, this is just some crazy guy, or this is that. But Lord Chaitanya has sent this person, and so we have to give whatever we can, and we have to facilitate their service and whatever. So this mission, this sense of mission, the main thrust was to recruit people into the movement rather than, transforming the world itself from where it is. And to be a devotee meant to live in a temple and to be fully engaged. And the world was simply an arena for preaching and picking up lost souls. And, during this phase, there were not so many opposing views or controversies amongst the devotees, at least at this early times. And there was a lot of positivity, not much cynicism. And we really had faith in building up this bhakti society. And of course, we had the market on bhakti. There was no competition. We didn't have any connections at all with other Gaudiya mutts or India even yet. So it was just us doing the bhakti thing. And, leadership, strong leadership to get this work done, it was really required. And we did have many really good leaders. How could we have got all this done? Somebody's got to organize, somebody's got to, get it done. And so it's quite amazing that we embrace this hierarchical system that Srila Prabhupada established, that we each have an authority and we have the temple president, GBC, etc. And it's just amazing how seriously we took this up, as previously we were just so much against authority and all of that. But, to do what we had to do at that time, it had to be like an army, there was a chain of command. It had to be structured. But the leaders, they were just us. We're all pretty much the same age. They weren't like something all different up in some ivory tower. Their lives were the same as ours. We all did the same things pretty much, shoulder to shoulder. And it was easy for anybody to get empowered. Anyone could go open a temple. So there wasn't like, the them and the us and the different. It was just all of us, but somebody had to make the decisions and whatever. So there was a spirit of cooperation and surrender. Really, so much so devotees, they could be traded or sent here or there. Oh, we need a pujari over here in New York. Oh, okay, you should go. Or, yeah, they need people in India, and, well, you send one and I'll send you two. And you're kind of like card game or something. But, now when you look back and you think, God, why did they do that, or how, but building this movement, it couldn't really have been done differently. We needed full-time people, fully immersed with one goal, and to spread Krishna consciousness. And, this phase of ISKCON, this was not at all about living a balanced life or about personal development. The main thrust was just forget yourself and get out there, and you just serve Srila Prabhupada, and everything else will come. And the mantra at the time was really, do the needful, do the needful. There was absolutely no sense of varnashram whatsoever. That had nothing to do with us. If there was something you liked to do, you might be engaged in something that you're good at, but it was almost encouraged that it might be better not to do those things that you're attached to, You might be more challenged or you more surrender by doing things that you're not inclined to, So that's how it was. And of course, there's a lot of romanticizing about this phase because it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. But it certainly wasn't all peaches and cream. There were often quite difficult things going on. There was plenty of suffering and stupidity and naivety. But in general, we helped each other to keep going. And of course, there were many very special devotees who really, really helped to pull everybody along. People that, must have been doing bhakti before, and they could really inspire. There were leaders like that, And so some people maybe had a real hard time struggling, but these, there were some really strong, enthusiastic devotees that, many of us were just pulled along in their wake. To give an example, like I remember when Indradyumna Swami and now Swami and his former wife, Kripamai, when they first came to the temple, I noticed them, the first time they came for the Sunday feast, and I thought, oh, I'm going to preach to them. Look at them. They look like devotees. They were, dancing in front. And then, of course, the Bhagavan, the temple president, he was sitting down with them immediately. And so very shortly they joined. And I always tell the story about, well, he was Brian at the time, that I was sitting next to him in the van when we went on the first Harinam, and I was telling him about Harinam. The senior devotee, maybe, a few months before, had joined. And when he went out in Harinam, and then when we were coming back in the truck, I was so Brian, how did you like Harinam, And he was just lit up like a light bulb, and he was just effulgent and blissful and smiling, and I love that, I want to do that every day for the rest of my life. And I was like, wow, that's really good, Brian. And what's even more amazing is that he actually pretty much did do that. But just to show that there were, there are devotees, we all come, it's not all one. Just because you joined in 1970, you're all the same. Everybody's coming from very, very different backgrounds. Some people just entering into bhakti. Some people maybe many lifetimes they've been, So there were some amazing people in the early days that kind of pulled everybody along with them. And the relationships were generally respectful, affectionate, and really have lasted a lifetime. The people that I did service with in these early days, I still have very, very close to them. We really, I guess it's sort of like if you were in a war together or something. There's some kind of bond that forms through these kind of incredible, struggles together and purifying, doing service together, and just learning about sharing and all these experiences with Srila Prabhupada. And I remember that we had kind of our first crisis that I remember was that there was a terrible accident with some devotees from Detroit, and 2 devotees were killed in that accident. And I think Petit Udaran was very severely hurt and was in the hospital. And Jananivas and I think Bhakta Will. And it was a big shock, for us, because somehow, when you're young, you just, in general, think you're invincible. And, now being devotees, we're like really immune. And so it was a big realization that Krishna's protection doesn't mean nothing bad happens to us externally. So that was kind of a first lesson that we learned. And one of the milestones, I would say, in the first, few months that I was a devotee, we had received the big Krishna books, those gray, large, I think there's 2 volumes. And they had come very soon after I joined the temple. And I remember the devotees were just so excited about these books, and they're looking through them. They'd heard stories, but they hadn't read them yet, and there's pictures and everything. So it was like a very exciting thing. I couldn't really relate to it. I thought, I don't know, those stories look like fairy tales and stuff. I mean, I'm sorry to admit, I have to admit, that was my initial, I wasn't drawn. But, you know, I knew it was something wonderful, but I didn't have the appreciation yet, you know. So, you know, after some time, so those books were just kind of sitting there. And then one day, Bhagavan called everyone together for a special meeting. The temple was growing. There was a lot of devotees joining. And so he told us that, you know, Prabhupada said, and that we have to sell these big books. And I was like sitting in the back and I'm thinking, oh no. And he started telling what they're doing in Los Angeles. And he told us how we were going to sell them on Harinam. And he gave it a demonstration. This is how you do it. So he said, you hold a book out and you get it in the hands of the other person, try to, and you say, you'll take it home and read it, won't you? And you nod your head. This is what we were supposed to do. And I'm thinking, I'm in the back and I'm thinking, no way. That's crazy. I thought it was so hard to sell back to Godheads. I just was really, I hated approaching people. I just was not a good Sankirtan devotee. I did it every day, but I loved the singing. I loved to do the Harinam, but when it was time to go out, you know, because I don't like people coming into my space, pushing into my space, so I don't really like it to do. I didn't like to do it to other people. What to speak of ask for money? It's so unhippie-like. And so he's explaining how we're going to do this. So the next day, you know, I kind of forgot about it. Next day we go out on Harinam, and then I see these big boxes of Krishna books. And I thought, I'm not going to do that. You know, I was really resistant. I don't want to do that. It's crazy. How is people going to buy this big book right on the street? No faith. And so I thought, I'm not. I was just like, I'm not going to do it. And so normally we would begin Harinam, we would chant, everyone would chant together for about, you know, half an hour, 40 minutes, and then Bhagavan would kind of nod at different people, okay, you go out, you keep chanting. And so I thought, I'm never going to open my eyes. I'm just going to keep my eyes closed, you know. But if you ever tell yourself that, you'll see it's really hard to do that. I did okay for quite a while, and then I thought, I have to see, did they already go out? Did the first batch go out? So the minute I peeked my eyes, Bhagavan was just looking right at me, and nobody had gone out yet. And he said, Sitala, here's a Krishna book. And I was like, oh no, I really don't want to do this. And now I know everybody's going to watch me, everybody's going to be looking, and I just had this tremendous resistance, you know, but you know, you just didn't say no to things. You just didn't. You just couldn't. And so I took the Krishna book and I just like, okay, I have to do this. So I'll just do it, but I did it with no heart, whatever. I just like, the first person who walked by, I just stuck it out in front of her. And to my shock, she just stopped. I didn't say anything. I just stuck the book out. She stopped, and she took the book, and she opened it up, and she saw George Harrison there. And she said, oh, well, how much is it? And then I was like, oh my God. I was in shock. And of course, I'm in front of the Harinam party. Nobody's done this before, so they're all watching. And then I say, I don't, it was like $10 or $12 or something, which was like a huge amount of money in that at that time. And I like kind of apologetically said, like I think it's like $10, And she just whipped out, whatever it was and gave it to me, didn't ask any questions and just went on. And, everybody started in the Harinam party started jumping and going, Haribol, Haribol, Jai, Jai, Jai. And wow, it was a real lesson for me. I could see that Krishna used me, the most skeptical and the most unenthusiastic, to show that if Sitala can do it, anybody can do it. So this was a very revealing time, and it was so blissful because I saw that Krishna used me. Krishna used me. It was a hard thing to do. It's hard to do book distribution if your tendency is to be introverted. So Detroit was quickly becoming a major North American center. It was growing rapidly, and we would regularly get letters from Srila Prabhupada. And so one morning, someone, I think it used to be Jagapurush, would blow the conch shell, and then we'd all gather there. And this was like end of November, 1970. So I'd been in the temple for 3 months, approximately. And so then we got a letter from Srila Prabhupada, and I'll read a little bit of it, not the whole letter. There was first some GBC matters to Bhagavan. And then Prabhupada said, Krishna consciousness means to be alive. Not that we get some time, we lay down and sleep. So your activities and reports are all encouraging to me. So please continue in this way. So also continue placing my books in libraries, colleges, bookstores, etc. And gradually the public will learn to appreciate this stock of transcendental literatures. People are accustomed to read all kinds of rubbish literatures. The principle is there, reading. We simply have to direct their attention to Krishna. And then he says, Narottam and Susan may be married accordingly, and I will be pleased to give my blessings. I hope this will find you in good health and cheerful mood. Susan, that's me. And I'm like, what? And everybody's, Jai, Jai, Haribol. Okay, a few announcements. So the wedding will be on Sunday. I don't know, maybe it's like Wednesday or something. And it was just a given. Susan and Narottam are getting married. So I'm like, he's talking about me and Narottam? That little cook in the kitchen who I thought was gay. And I was like, wow. And then afterwards, I remember Sharadia or Saradia coming up to me, and she was like, she had gotten married a while back, and I think she wasn't having a good time of it. And she was like, are you sure you know what you're doing? And I'm like, no, I don't know anything about this, but I don't know. Prabhupada says, is giving his blessings. And she's like, well, do you like him? Or I said, well, yeah, I mean, everybody likes Narottam, but, he's not like he's gay. I'm not at all attracted to him. And then she was like, well, that's good. You won't fall down. And so I was like, yeah, that's good. I mean, So now I just accept it. I guess this is the next thing you do. Um, we're just doing all these new things, and this is part of it, and whatever. And so I call my mother, who lives in Detroit, doesn't know that I'm in Detroit. The last I contacted her, I was in California, hippie, and she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know I'm a devotee yet. And I says, "Hey, Mom, guess what? I'm in Detroit." "Oh, really? When did you get here?" "Well, I've been here for a bit. And, guess what else, I'm living in a Hare Krishna temple." Then, total silence. "Oh, honey, is that those people that wear like bed sheets and they dance in the street?" And I was just surprised that she even knew who we were because there wasn't many of us. And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, and I said, "Guess what else?" And then, silence on the other end, and "You're not getting married." "Yeah, how did you know?" My poor mother. Oh my God. Our parents, what we put them through. She was such a trooper. She didn't even like, "Okay, when is this happening?" And amazing, amazing that she accepted this is going to happen and she's going to come. And so of course people will say, "What on earth were you thinking? Are you just stupid? Are you crazy? Are you naive? Were you coerced into doing this? Were you brainwashed? Why, would you marry someone that, you're not even necessarily attracted to?" Or, I wasn't the only one. There are many, many marriages like this, that happened. And, how could we do that? How could we do that? And, from the perspective of today, it seems absurd. But you have to, when you look at history, you have to put yourself into the shoes of the time. And, everything was secondary to becoming and spreading Krishna consciousness, even marriage. I'm not saying these are the right things or the good things or the best, I'm just saying that's how we felt. Couples got together so that they could help each other be Krishna conscious and go out and open a temple. And Srila Prabhupada sent a letter very soon after that, and expressing how important and pleasing it was to Srila Prabhupada. So in the next letter, I'll read a little bit from it. If I'll get it here. Let's see. So Srila Prabhupada says, "I have heard of your plan to open a branch in Trinidad. That will be very nice, and the selected members are approved by me. The more we open branches, the more I feel encouraged. These branches are like the oasis in a vast desert. In the desert there is no water, but occasionally, if one is fortunate, he may come in contact with an oasis, and he is saved. Similarly, in this material world, we are drying up due to lack of spiritual knowledge. Our ISKCON centers are meant to give relief to the dried up, conditioned souls who are searching after the nectar of joyful life. So, I request you and all other members of ISKCON to flood the world with Krishna conscious centers and realize the prediction of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As many towns and villages there are, my name will be known." So this was very, very, very real and of utmost importance to us. More important than who we were marrying even. Of course, it's not the foundation for a long-lasting, wonderful marriage. However, many of those couples are still together. It wasn't all crisis at all. And for me, I was thinking, if this is what I need to do, if this is a process, then this is what I'll do. My logic at the time, I'm not saying it was logical, I'm just expressing how I felt, that I didn't really want to be married. I just came out fresh from the freedom of associating with, the opposite sex. I've been there, I've done that. I don't really, I want to do Krishna consciousness. I want to be immersed in this. And marriage was just not, I wasn't thinking about it at all. I had no thoughts of having children, nothing. I just was in this new, incredible, wonderful process, and I just wanted to keep doing it. And I thought, well, Nartam, I mean, we knew each other, we didn't know each other intimately, but, he's a really great person. He's a really, really nice devotee. And he wasn't gay, but I thought he was gay. Other people thought he was gay. And I thought, I'm not going to get entangled with him. I'm not. And I didn't. I'm not saying that's good or that's a good marriage. I'm just saying that actually it was true. And it's not necessarily recommended. But for that time, I have no regret. I don't regret that decision, or I don't even think it was foolish. It was meant to be. We did amazing things together. But, it was necessary. Some of the things that we did, they were just necessary to establish this movement. And it wasn't about what would make me happy, as it was about how to make spiritual progress, how to please Srila Prabhupada. And, in retrospect, I wouldn't change that decision at all. So this may be, hard for people to understand. But if you haven't tried to establish a movement, then yeah, it would be hard to understand. But we were very, very serious about it. So, I was told that, somebody said I should get him a new kurta. He needed a new kurta for the wedding. Now, understand that I have never been to a fire yagya. I'm not initiated. I don't understand, any of these things. Everything is new. And so they said, well, there's no time for you to make him a kurta or, make a bead bag or something. So maybe you could just go, they have them at this local head shop, hippie shop. And so I said, oh, okay. So someone was supposed to go with me because normally we didn't go places alone. And you'll see why. So I went out and, I got this kurta. And then I'm kind of out in the world, I'm in my sari, but it's the first time I've been out alone somewhere. And, I'm thinking, God, what am I doing, Getting married tomorrow. And, just start thinking. I thought, well, I'm out here. I might as well, maybe I'll go visit my brother, So I went to my brother's house. Pretty sure it was my brother. Somebody I went to visit. I think so. And so we sit there like there's a bunch of people there. God, tell us about this. What are you doing, And it was like really fun. It was like all old people that I knew, and they were smoking dope, and I was there in my sari, and so they're just passing around the joint, and so I just take it, and it's like, having, you go to somebody's house and they offer you a cup of tea, and you just have a cup of tea, and, so I'm not really thinking about it. I mean, I'm just being honest here. So you get the sense of, who we were, where we came from. But so, I think I might have even taken some mescaline. This is just like social exchanges. This is how people were. So, smoking um, and getting stoned, and I hated it because I was seriously trying to explain Krishna consciousness to the group there. We're just sitting in a circle and everybody's listening to me and they're focused. It was the first time I had an opportunity to speak to my kind of people where I came from. And I didn't feel focused. I felt clouded over. And I just hated it. It was like I was just trying to push away this being stoned. I could see that it was bringing me down, that I was up. I was already up and this was taking me down. And so in some ways it was really, really a good and very practical experience of this is nothing. This is I hated it, it just was clouding me. And so that was good for me because, if you think about how big a problem intoxication is in the world, addiction is one of the biggest social problems. And many devotees were immersed in drug taking. I was immersed in drug taking. And it just felt normal to me. Taking acid daily or whatever, it just felt normal. And Srila Prabhupada saved thousands of young people from the terrible, terrible effects of addiction. And it is actually miraculous because it is very hard to give up drugs for many people. Many people struggle with that for their entire lives. And I left and I did something every day, all the time. And then in one day I stopped. And I never thought about it until that moment when I came out. And just because I was in the social setting, I did it. And I never thought about it again. Never. Never did I think, oh, I wish I could. No. Prabhupada, he just lifted us up. It's miraculous. It is a very hard thing for people to give up. But he gave us a higher taste. And therefore, it was easy. I didn't even think about it. I didn't even think I'm giving up drugs. I was too busy. And you look and you think how, what an expensive and huge problem in society. It's said that there's something like $750 billion in America alone that is spent, due to the social costs of that come from addictions, which probably includes alcohol and tobacco as well as other drugs. But the crime, the unemployment, the domestic abuse, the divorce, the homelessness, deaths from overdose, the effects on children, what to speak of, it is amazing what Prabhupada gave us these 4 regulative principles. He's understood these are not just some rules that religious people follow. This is mega. This is a big problem in the world. And Prabhupada proved that he could get rid of that problem if people could get a higher taste. And what to speak of, the other principles, meat eating, gambling, huge billions of dollars on gambling and meat eating, and what to speak of illicit sex. The problems that all of these things cause to society. And Prabhupada just boom, he just knocked it out of us. I mean, I'm not saying, I mean, there are devotees that have fallen back there, but you know, in general, I think we have pretty good record. And it is just, you know, these four regulative principles, they're just not, you know, something there to spoil your fun. It's to build a cultured society, a respectable society, and save hundreds and billions of people could be fed all over the world luxuriously if we didn't have all these problems from these four principles being just broken constantly. Massive impact on society. You know, so they're not just some religious rules. You know, Srila Prabhupada fully understood how adopting these principles could completely change the trajectory of material civilization, even if a small percentage of people adopted